Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Monday, September 13th, Maplewood City Council Manager Workshop. City Manager Coleman, would you please do the roll call for us?
Certainly. Councilmember Cave.
Here.
Councilmember Juniman.
Here.
Councilmember Villavicencio.
Here.
And Councilmember Knudsen.
Here.
Mayor Abrams.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. Next thing on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Knudsen, seconded by Juniman, the motion to approve the agenda. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, then let's take a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes. We have no unfinished business tonight. We have one item of new business, which really is the culmination of, it seems, a number of years that we have been working on this in terms of the North End zoning district. And tonight, Jeff Thompson, our Community Development Director, is going to start this off, and we'll welcome Rita Trapp as our presenter for tonight. So, Mr. Thompson, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you introduced, this is a several-year process we've been going through for the vision plan for the area around Maplewood Mall and St. John's Hospital for the North End. It's also actually part of our implementation of our 2040 comp plan. So as part of that, we're reviewing our regulatory ordinances, our subdivision, and more our zoning ordinances to ensure that they are in conformance with the land use and plan that we've developed in that comp plan. So the culmination of the North End Vision Plan and the implementation of that zoning, as well as what we've incorporated into this is the council direction around parking. I know earlier this year the council expressed an interest in updating or reviewing our parking ordinances and parking regulations. And so we've kind of wrapped that into the North End because we think that's the most pertinent district at this time to review what our parking requirements are in light of kind of current practices. So with that, we've invited Ms. Trapp here this evening to go walk through the zoning implementation work for the North End and some of the community engagement that we've done.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Ms. Trapp, do you want to identify yourselves and welcome to our meeting?
Certainly. Thank you. It's a pleasure to see all of you again. I'm Rita Trapp. I work for HKGI. Many of you I'm familiar with. I worked on the park system plan, the comprehensive plan, and the nature center plan. So I'm quite familiar with you and excited to be here to actually talk about implementation, something very strategic. And hopefully the goal tonight is to answer any questions you have, to see if we've covered everything or if you have concerns. And I'll walk through that in my presentation. So if that's good, I can
Thank
begin.
you.
So just a brief overview to kind of make everybody aware and on the same page. The purpose of the proposed North End District is to implement the guidance from the comprehensive plan as was referenced, as well as the North End Vision Plan that was finished immediately after the comprehensive plan was adopted. Overall, the vision is to create a premier mixed-use area in Maplewood. In the comprehensive plan, we tried to create a lot of flexibility in order to have a mix of different types of uses and create really a destination for the city. We're interested in kind of capitalizing on the multimodal transportation access that is and will be there as part of the BRT rush line. Looking at high-quality design as well as greenways and open space. So the district is designed to try and implement those types of activities within the district. And again, we have recognized, just as you have, that there are a lot of existing uses that are viable today, and we don't want to create a district that will immediately cause nonconformities or problems or issues, and so we've tried to include some provisions that allow existing uses to continue, to expand, to refurbish, to feel viable until at such time that they're ready. And I'll highlight some of those as I move through the presentation. The development process, we've developed the draft code in consultation with city staff, and then we did review it with the Planning Commission. You'll see I kind of have an arrow back and forth because as we had a draft or parts of the draft, we worked with the Planning Commission, received their input, made revisions, checked back in. And so it's been a back and forth with the Planning Commission. Then we did neighborhood outreach, which I'll mention in just a moment and provide some information about. And then we're here before you to check in to make sure we're headed in the right direction. The intention, if we are, is to move forward to the Planning Commission with a public hearing in October. But we wanted to make sure that we were headed in the direction you all anticipated and that we met kind of the goals that you had as part of this implementation district. As I referenced, I just wanted to highlight outreach on the front end of the process rather than waiting till the back, because we just recently finished some outreach for the zoning district. As you can see, we did send out letters to all of the property owners and/or tenants and even some of the residents that are immediately adjacent this area. We have on the website fairly detailed information about the district, as well as a video that staff produced that walks through a presentation similar to this. It's not exactly the same, but it provides that background information. We held a virtual meeting kind of in the beginning of August, and then we had a neighborhood meeting near the end of August, where those people that received those letters and anybody else that saw it on the website were invited to attend, where we could provide additional information. We had about 15 individuals, a little bit more, participating in either the virtual meeting or the in-person meeting. Many of them were tenants or property owners in and around the area. We did have a couple of residents or investment property owners that participated as well. Staff has also had some individual conversations. As you know, there was a North End working group, and so some of those conversations were with those individuals who had participated in that, and there was an opportunity to have those one-on-one conversations about concerns or questions or making sure that what is being proposed kind of works with their vision as well. Generally, we've mostly just received clarifying questions. There hasn't been a major concern. There hasn't been a major upset. There were a few really good points, mostly about existing properties, and we made some adjustments to the language to make it more clear about what was anticipated. For example, there's always that question, if my business burns to the ground, what can I do? Which is non-conforming and pretty standard, but good for us to go through and have those conversations and make sure that the language is really clear in the code. So those adjustments were made in the draft that was provided to you. Just for everybody's benefit, the area that we're talking about is bordered by White Bear, Beam, Hazelwood, and County Road D. I have on the screen kind of the yellow hash marks, kind of marks the area. Includes the Maplewood Mall, Birch Run Station. It does not include St. John's Hospital, although the existing conditions around the district did influence some of the decisions that were made in how we crafted the regulations. As you all know, the existing area is dominated by auto-oriented development, very parking lot heavy, and our intention is to try and change that, make it more pedestrian friendly, include more bicycle access, make it someplace that you would want to be walking around and feel like you're actually in a district. The 2040 Comprehensive Plan, just to kind of, again, I'm just in the overview, make it really brief, but the intention was to guide it mixed-use community. That was accommodating a higher density of dwelling units than in other areas of the community. You only have a few spots where we have that higher end. That reflects the direction from the Metropolitan Council, the fact that you do have the transit stop already there, and then it'll be part of Rush Line. But the intention was to really make it a mixture of uses. And really, the Maplewood Mall area was seen as kind of a center for high-quality design. And we've attempted to try and put in the standards things that are reasonable for standards, but also add some additional guidelines for folks to help, again, elevate the design in that area. And then there was the North End Vision Plan, which was prepared immediately after the comprehensive plan. And that has a specific vision, again, talking about the mix of uses and really establish this long-term vision. The long-term vision established what could happen in the area. We did not design the North End District to exactly implement what you see in this graphic. And the reason for that, as our understanding, is we wanted to have a lot of flexibility. We don't want to ensure that a specific hotel is on a specific piece of property or that there's residential in a very specific spot. The intention was that we were trying to look at the form and character more than exactly where the uses are. So we use this as a guidance. In particular, I think we use this more for the greenways and how those greenway connections would work through and how the streets would be laid out, and less about the uses. But we did use the street design, building design, and open design principles that they had in the North End Vision Plan as a foundation for the development of the regulations. So the approach to the new district. The approach is kind of fourfold that I wanted to highlight. One is flexibility, both in uses and phasing, and I've already referenced that, but I'll kind of highlight some elements of the North End District that achieve that intent. The regulating plans, those can be seen as kind of the the framework for how we design the regulations. This district is going to be different, as I referenced. Usually we do districts and we say these uses are allowed, these uses aren't allowed, and then we kind of give some development standards. This one instead talks about any of the uses are allowed, but along this street, these are the types of standards you need to meet. So that's what makes this district different than the rest of the districts you have in the community, and those regulating plans become important because they identify the types of streets or the types of parks and open space that the community has. Then we have street design, site design, and building design standards. And I referenced this. We took as a foundation all of the guidelines that are in the North End Vision Plan. I think it numbers over 100. And then work through those to identify what are realistic standards, because we don't want to put standards in that are too heavy-handed, that are too difficult for the flexibility that you need to accommodate the differences between different types of development. We focused on those that were really important, that are really realistic for standards. And then as I referenced in the packet materials, then we created a set of design guidelines that added to that and said, you know, these can't be standards, but these are things that we think are so important that we still want to make sure property owners and developers know they were important to the community. And so we have that design guideline document that we also provided. So relative to uses permitted, the intention in the North End District is to have townhouses, row houses, apartments, or maybe residential over some other type of use, institutional and civic uses, and then a broad range of commercial uses, retail, health, services, offices, hotels. And again, this district does not specifically state in this part of this district you can have this use or not. All of them are permitted. Relative to development phasing, I did reference this, but just to make sure, it recognizes again that development is going to happen over time. There's many property owners in this area. It requires any new development or significant redevelopment, so more than 50% addition of square footage or complete takedown of the existing structure and construction of a new structure to follow these guidelines. However, if you have an existing building and you want to add on to it, you want to restripe your parking, you need to add parking, etc., you can do those as long as you follow the existing development standards of the code and you're not impacting the street network, because the street network is one of the important elements as we're trying to add connections instead of having that large expansive area that people have to drive around. We're trying to make those connections, so that's the only element that we said would have to be adhered to in order to allow an existing structure to be expanded. Relative to design standards, I won't go through all of them, but just to make sure that we kind of understand the framework. The regulating plans that I identified, again, all of the building and site design standards are based on your location along specific streets or along specific greenway or open space corridors. Based on the vision plan, we identified 4 types of streets: the minor arterials, major collectors, the local connectors, the neighborhood main streets, and the neighborhood internal streets. Generally, we're going in that, from very busy down to walkable streets, and we have different regulations based on those, and these, again, are based on the North End Vision Plan. There's less stringent standards on the minor arterials or major collectors. There's also less stringent standards in terms of development. They're already constructed. Generally, the city is not responsible, so that's what makes those different. And then about the open space and parks, we again use the North End Vision Plan to look at specifically extending or creating that greenway, kind of that connection trail that already exists near St. John's from Bruce Vento over to Beam, trying to make that connection through, and then also looking at pocket parks to make sure that we have some green space and some relief. Because one of the purposes of this is to give relief to that wide expanse of parking and impervious surface. And so this looks at requiring developments that actually are on the neighborhood park areas to devote that land to neighborhood parks, and also to provide some private usable open space. And that's a provision that's new that also is included. Relative to street design standards, again, they're based on what street, the emphasis on comfort, trails, bike paths, the relationship between public open space and the right-of-way. The graphic that we use is an example of trying to really communicate the idea that we want to make sure to think about active spaces. If you can have a cafe and some seating in the cafe, it shouldn't take up the area where a sidewalk would actually be. So again, kind of communicating how the building, the active space, the sidewalk, and the street relate to each other. And so those are some of the street design standards. The intention is there's some flexibility, and there's some working with the engineering department about how exactly those are applied or where they are applied, but there are different standards for right-of-way widths, for how the street would be constructed curb to curb, whether there's sidewalks or trails, all based on the type of street. Site design standards, that's probably where we put the most part of effort, is trying to figure out what are realistic site and building design standards. The standards, again, are based on street type, but there is very similar standards for each of them. It just depends upon how strict those standards are based on the type of street you are. One element that we included here that's a little bit different is something called a build-to zone, which is the idea that we want all of the buildings closer to the street, and we all want them to kind of have a similar street present. We don't really want to have one building 10 feet off the street, another building 50 feet back with parking in front. We kind of all want them the same, but we also don't want to have a standard that said everyone has to be exactly 10 feet, and we don't want to give any consideration. So this has kind of a distance within which we're hoping that all the streets will be located, or all the buildings will be located toward the street, and that distance is based on the type of street you have. So a neighborhood Main Street where we're really trying to encourage pedestrians are going to have buildings closer. We recognize along County Road D, Beam, that's a whole different story, and those buildings might be set back farther. And so we're looking at those differences. And then building placement, some of these are very similar to what you have today in terms of minimum side and minimum rear standards. So again, not having high standards to provide flexibility. But we do also include a minimum street frontage, which is the amount of the building that we want towards the street. So if you are on a neighborhood Main Street where we really want to have pedestrians, we're going to require more of the building to be near the street to kind of give that street presence. As you are on Beam or County Road D, we're going to decrease that back because, again, we're not really thinking about as much pedestrianness along those two corridors. Hopefully people would be inside the district and then access Beam or County Road D afterwards as they kind of use that to cross out of the district. Off-street parking, as we've discussed in a variety of areas, again, behind the building, side to the building, not in front of the building.